Hi, everybody. It's Harvard lawyer Lee. I'm going to be reacting to Amber Heard's interview yesterday on Today. Which sounds crazy, interview yesterday on Today. Nonetheless, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm also later going to be responding to her interview today on Today, if you will. What I want to do is go through and talk about some of the things she said, some of the mistakes that she made. And I want to give you an overview from a legal perspective of what she may have done to her case and to her appeal. Let's get started.
As you sit here with me now, has it sunk in? How could it? It's surreal.
Okay, first, I want you to notice that whenever she doesn't want to answer a question, she answers with a question. So Savannah Guthrie's question was, has the verdict sunk in? Have you come to a full realization of kind of what happened in the last 7 weeks? And she says, how could it? She doesn't answer yes or no, it's how could it? And you're going to see that several times that she'll answer with another question. And that's a dodging technique that witnesses will sometimes use.
And difficult, in part, yes. This has been a long time coming. Do you stand by your testimony and your accusations against Johnny Depp about abuse? Of course. To my dying day, will stand by every word of my testimony.
That is absolutely huge, because that's the kind of thing that might make sense to a PR person, but doesn't make sense to an attorney, because she was just found liable for defamation. She was just found responsible for having defamed Johnny Depp. Now, the statement that was issued immediately after the verdict, arguably, maybe that could fit within the judicial privilege. It wasn't in a judicial setting. I don't think it would hold up if it ever was sent up on appeal, but at least it was very close in time. The judicial privilege protects you if you say something inside a courtroom. So you can see where a statement issued when you're steps from the courthouse, at least it's close. This is weeks later. This is not something that is done on the spur of the moment, and it's not inside a courtroom. So there's not a privilege or protection for her. So now she's doubling down on what she said. That presents a real risk to Amber in terms of more defamation. We're going to see more of that in the video. Let's keep looking.
I think vast majority of this trial was played out on social media. I think that this trial is an example of that gone haywire, gone amok, and the jury is not immune to that. You think the jury saw it?
Okay, I want you to watch for the question again.
How could they not?
See what I mean? She was asked, do you think the jury saw it? And instead of answering yes or no, she says, how could they not? This is critical because the jury was instructed every single day that they were not supposed to look at or go on social media, any news outlets, do anything that would prejudice them or cause them to see other people's views about the trial. They were supposed to keep their view on what happened in the courtroom, what they personally saw. They weren't even supposed to talk to other jurors until the final deliberations. So the argument that they saw things is pretty serious, because it's an allegation that they disregarded what the judge said for them to do. She could argue that they did do that, but she has no evidence, zero evidence, that there was any conduct by the jury that disregarded what the judge told them they ought to do. And yet here she is saying that. And notice that she isn't really saying it. Instead of saying, yes, I think that's what the jury did, she says, how could they not? That way, she's not actually stating that they did. But on the other hand, her argument makes no sense if she's not saying that the jury, in fact, was going out looking at social media.
I think even the most well-intentioned juror, it would have been impossible to avoid this.
People online and crowds outside the courthouse made it clear where they stood.
Every single day I passed for 3, 4, sometimes 6 blocks, city blocks lined with people holding signs saying burn the witch, death to Amber. After 3.5 weeks,
as soon as she starts doing burn the witch and then she starts doing this, she's looking for what was something else they said. She just made up something after that. She couldn't remember anything else specific that was said. So the death to Amber, I would be willing to bet she didn't actually see a sign that said that. That was just the impression she came away with, but not a specific.
I took the stand and saw just a courtroom packed full of Captain Jack Sparrow fans who were vocal, energized.
Can you put
So this is an important point that I think Amber actually has that's legitimate. Amber is saying the jury may not have gone out and looked for people who were talking about it on YouTube or people who were talking about it on Twitter. But on the other hand, they may not have seen a news broadcast, but on the other hand, they couldn't help but see the crowds. When they drove to the courthouse, just like I did, they drove through those exact same crowds. Crowds of people wearing Jack Sparrow outfits, crowds of people dressed up with signs that said, "We love you, Johnny." They saw all of that. And that sort of crowd feeling made it feel like everyone in the world was for Johnny. Now, she has a legitimate point on that the surroundings of the courthouse might affect the jury. But she does not have a legitimate point on social media affecting the jury because there's no evidence that the jury went out and saw that, went out and looked for that. But this is a different argument here. She's arguing that the crowd around the courthouse, that, however, was not ultimately within the judge's control, because crowd control was keeping people from entering the courthouse, from interfering with people who are coming to the courthouse, but simply gathering it and peacefully doing so is not something that the judge can or should control. So to the extent that that influenced the jury, Amber has a point, but again, there's no evidence that it did. She does have a point that they would have seen that. She doesn't even have a point that they would have seen social media.
put into words how that felt?
This was the most humiliating and horrible thing I've ever been through. I have never felt more removed from my own humanity.
Okay, that's sort of a strange statement. I've never felt more removed from my own humanity. It's hard to know what that even means. It doesn't seem like it was scripted because it doesn't make a lot of sense in the context. I understand that she is trying to convey, hey, this felt bad. Okay, that makes sense. But how this removed you from your humanity is unclear, and she doesn't explain it. When they play the bigger interview, that may be something that gets explained, but it was something that stuck out to me as peculiar.
I felt less than human.
Okay, why is it that it just seems so insincere when she says that? It's something about the way she cocks her head and holds her mouth. I felt so inhuman. It doesn't seem sincere. It doesn't seem like something that comes from the heart, just as you watch it.
Go back to the day of the verdict. Were you feeling confident?
How could you?
That's a great question. I wish I could say yes to that. I want to say yes to you, but it wouldn't be true. Even if you think that I'm lying, you still couldn't look me in the eye and tell me that you think on social media there's been a fair representation. There was another trial.
So before she gets into the UK trial, so she's saying social media wasn't fair to her. That may or may not be the case, but it doesn't change the fact that a jury, which at least supposedly was not looking at any social media and which was instructed every single day, do not look at social media. And there's no evidence that they did. That jury still disbelieved Amber Heard. That jury still thought that she was lying and filled out the verdict form saying that what she had said was false. Now let's get into the UK trial.
Handled it dealt with the same substantive issues that had even more evidence in. In fact, my evidence was largely kept out, really important pieces of evidence kept out.
Okay, two responses to that. First of all, the UK case was quite different. It was decided by a judge. Amber Heard was not even a party. She testified as a witness, but she was not a specific party. So the fact that the UK case came out differently when there was purposefully, intentionally, for good reason, different evidence, different parties is irrelevant. That would never have come into this trial, in my opinion. I know Amber's team wanted it in, but that would make no sense to put it in here. It would prejudice the jury without any real impact or anything that had to do with what was happening in the courtroom here. And then secondly,
done differently, handled.
Yeah, so she's talking about how if the case had been done differently, if it had been handled differently, like in the UK, I would have won the case. But in this particular case, there was different evidence because it was a different case. And Amber suggested that she had mountains of evidence that was kept out by the judge. I will tell you this, that judge let in more evidence than just about any other judge would have on both sides. The evidence was extraordinary that came in. I think there's going to be very little evidence. I listened to Amber's proffer, and I think there's very little evidence that she has left over that didn't get put in. I did a video on that you can view for yourself. It's called Amber's Secret Evidence, and it's her proffer saying, this is the evidence that we had that we would have liked to bring in, Judge, and you wouldn't let us. You have to do that before an appeal so that the appellate court knows what was left out and can make a ruling on that. In this particular case, I don't think there was anything that she's going to find is going to cause the case to be reversed. But that's what she's saying. She's saying this huge mountain of evidence is out there and this judge kept it out. I think that's a very tough argument.
Differently by a judge instead of a jury.
Some evidence is admissible in a UK court that is not admissible in a
That's
US
right.
court. Do you think that maybe he just had better lawyers?
I will say his lawyers did certainly a better job of distracting the jury from the real issues.
For some,
So it was not just a matter of distracting the jury at all. It was a matter of, for example, in the cross-examination of Amber Heard, Johnny Depp's team took Amber Heard's words, they took Amber Heard's documents, Amber Heard's messages, and they took those and cross-examined her with those. Like, you said this, here's a document. You said you had a bruise, here's a picture. You said, there was a wine stain, here's a picture. You said this happened on such and such a date and on such and such a date. How could it have been both? And so those sorts of cross-examinations were related to what Amber said. They were not related in any way to some kind of malicious influence that Johnny Depp's team was trying to do. These were Amber Heard's words. These were actual photographs.
people, they just were frankly disgusted by the whole thing and don't have much sympathy for either one of you.
May I say, that is obviously Savannah Guthrie's view. That was just that question. Clearly, that's what Savannah Guthrie thinks about it.
Can you understand that?
Absolutely. I would not blame the
Notice how Amber dipped her head and went into the question like, don't want to answer that, here we go.
average person for looking at this and how it's been covered and not think that it is Hollywood brats at their worst. But what people don't understand is it's actually so much bigger than that.
So Hollywood brats at their worst, that's a great title, frankly, because there was a lot of that. But I think that it misreads what people perceived as a difference in sincerity between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Johnny Depp came in and said from the opening statements, got a drug problem, got an alcohol problem. Amber Heard's team said, yeah, it's all his fault because he had a drug and alcohol problem and he refused to do anything about it. But the actual evidence showed he tried real hard and he continued to have a drug and alcohol problem. He didn't run from that. He admitted that. He said, yeah, I have this problem and I acknowledge that, but I didn't abuse anybody. That's a very real argument. Whereas Amber Heard refused to accept even small things that she could have accepted, that she could have acknowledged. Okay, yeah, I did that. You're going to hear her best shot at it in just a minute.
This is not only about our First Amendment right to speak.
But here's the thing about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects free speech. It doesn't protect lies that amount to defamation. And that was the issue in the case.
Yes, exactly. You can't go into, the free speech does not protect you if you go into a crowded theater and you scream fire. We get the concept of free speech from the Greeks.
That was bizarre. Where did that come from? I mean, it isn't answering the question. It's kind of like a historical diatribe. So, and then the origin of the word is not an answer. But that was a great question by Savannah Guthrie.
My understanding of what that means is not just the freedom to speak. It's a freedom to speak truth to power.
She practiced
The truth is the word.
Yes.
And that was the issue.
And that's all I spoke.
Question.
And I spoke it to power, and I paid the price.
So obviously that's not the issue, because speaking the truth to a jury of your peers, in fact, a jury of folks who are not movie stars and have never achieved the fame or money that you have, is hardly speaking truth to power. That's simply speaking truth or not speaking truth. And remember, the jury found it wasn't speaking truth. The jury found that under each of Johnny Depp's 3 statements. They had to specifically find that the statement was false, that Amber Heard made the statement and that it was false. The judge required that on the verdict form. Every one of those statements she found to be false.
In the closing arguments, the Depp lawyer called your testimony the performance of a lifetime and said you were acting. What do you say to that?
Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers. I'm the performer. I had listened to weeks of testimony insinuating that, or saying quite directly that, I'm a terrible actress. So I'm a bit confused how I could be both.
The Depp team.
So I will give Amber Heard this point, and I had to listen to this one 2 or 3 times before it made so little sense when I first listened to it. What did Edward Scissorhands have to do with it? I think Amber's argument was, look, you say it was my performance of a lifetime. He's a great actor too. He was performing also. That's what she's trying to argue. Look, he's the kind of, but she doesn't really say that. And the reason she doesn't say that, but kind of insinuate it, thus confusing everyone, is that he didn't ever appear to be acting. Whereas she did. When she went into her sort of hysterical description of what had happened between them, she appeared to be acting, even overacting. With Johnny Depp, he never seemed to be that. You never got the over the top, here's, this big bundle of emotions, let me throw them down in front of you. You never got that. You got the, yeah, I made some mistakes here. Yeah, I can't believe I said that either. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. Big mistake. And that difference is what conveyed to both the world and the jury. It conveyed in the sincerity and the way he was perceived as having been telling the truth.
Argued that you were the abuser, that you instigated physical violence. Did you?
I never had to instigate it. I responded to it. When you're living in violence and it becomes normal, as I testified to, you have to adapt.
You say you were.
So there's a non-answer again. She was asked, did you abuse Johnny